We're back once again with Massachusetts Senate Minority Leader Bruce Tarr, Bill Newell, of course, and it's our Friday update. Bill?
Well, Senator Tarr, let's ask you first. The governor made some news on this Friday about about scaling back the reopening piece, shrinking the size of gatherings, if you will. Give us an update on how you take what the governor had to say today.
So I actually just got off the phone with the governor a few minutes ago, Bill, and I told him that I had to talk to both of you, and so he understood. But, you know, we've got a pretty serious situation, and what we're talking about is a resurgence in the number of cases that are being tested positive for COVID-19. And the governor has all along told us that how we move forward in terms of reopening and gatherings and things of that nature will be entirely driven by the science and by the health indicators. And both of those things right now are very concerning. And so the governor just a short time ago issued a new order relative to public gatherings. And that order will now restrict indoor gatherings and outdoor gatherings. And I have it right here. And so I'm going to just make sure that I get it right. This is going to take effect next Tuesday. And the change is going to be that for indoor gatherings, the limit is now going to be 8 persons per 1,000 square feet of accessible indoor floor space and never more than 25 people. So indoor gatherings, not more than 25 people, and outdoor gatherings, never more than 50 people. And so those are changes that are more restrictive than what we have had. And so going in a different direction than that. The other interesting thing, Bill and Rick, is the discussion of phase 2 or stage 2 of phase 3 being pushed off now indefinitely. There had been some talk about when that was going to go into effect, when some more things could open. Clearly right now, that's going to be put on hold. So there is a lot of concern, and this new order also comes on the heels of Rhode Island being added to the list of states that you have to either quarantine or have a negative test to come into Massachusetts. So definitely we're in a situation where we were making good progress, we were making steady progress. A lot of the health indicators are still good, but the concern is to stay ahead of what now appears to be a trend of increasing positive cases.
I saw on the news last night, a doctor, I guess it was on Channel 5, called it a slow creep instead of a spike. And Senator, does this, we just got back to being able to go to restaurants outdoors and a little bit indoors. Obviously, this is going to affect that kind of thing.
Well, it's a great question, Rick. So one of the things the governor has stressed is that people going to a restaurant and following the guidance of wearing a mask when you're not eating and the normal kinds of things that have been discussed, that isn't the problem. And so it shouldn't have an effect on that. The real concern is that places that might not be bona fide restaurants, where the focus is more on consumption of alcohol than eating food, that is something that's being looked at very carefully, because those are places where there tend to be more close social interaction and a greater opportunity for the transmission of COVID-19. So for right now, restaurants that are operating as they have been will likely not be affected, and people will still be able to go to them and to eat and enjoy one of the experiences that we all missed so much, you know, during the time when we couldn't go to restaurants. Those will continue to be in operation as they have been.
Senator Tarr, I want to just follow up on one last thing on that. Is right now we're also hearing from cities and towns about their schools, and they're making decisions about what to do. Some have said already that the high schools are not coming back, but maybe some part-time elementary school students to return. Does that impact this at all, what the governor just said today, or is it kind of one of those things that it's really kind of not connected to school decisions?
Well, whenever we talk about the transmission of the virus, everything is interconnected to some degree. And the best way that I can describe the school reopening issue is very, very fluid. The Department of Elementary and Secondary Education and Commissioner Riley had asked every school district to prepare 3 separate plans. One for complete remote learning, one for complete in-school learning with students in the school buildings, and the third is a hybrid, a combination of those two. So we're going to continue to see those plans get unveiled, but every school district should have all three of those options available. And as we get closer to the actual opening of schools, the reopening of schools, then some very difficult decisions are going to have to be made. And we've already seen some of those decisions, and some school districts deciding not to come into school at all in person. And I think we're going to see more of that, but it's a very, very changeable situation.
Gotcha.
The last time we talked, there was some real hot button issues, but we were headed toward the end of the legislative session. That's all been changed.
It has in many ways, Rick. So as we've talked about, the rules of the legislature, and they are rules, they are not laws, and they are not the Constitution, the Constitution does require us to meet every 72 hours. And we would have continued to do that no matter what. But the rules of the legislature dictate that in the second year of the legislative session, that formal sessions where controversial business is taken up and there's debate and roll calls, that those end at the end of July. But the House and the Senate, because of the time that was lost due to the pandemic, and because we may have to deal with some exigent circumstances due to the pandemic, have suspended that rule. It's Rule 12A. It's a joint rule of the House and the Senate, meaning that we now can come in to formal session through the end of the year and actually into the beginning of next year. Generally speaking, the legislative session runs into the first week of January. And so we are able to come back. There are several conference committees meeting, which are 3 members of the Senate, 3 members of the House, get appointed to reconcile the differences when the House and the Senate pass different versions of a bill. And there are a number of those committees meeting right now, and I suspect if they're able to come to an agreement on any particular bill and give us what's called a conference committee report, which is a reconciliation, then we'll come back to consider that. And so you have a number of important bills that are in that phase. Police reform is certainly one that everyone's been paying attention to. I actually serve on that conference committee. There is one on transportation, there's one on healthcare, and there's one on energy and climate change issues. So in those cases, those 6 members in each instance are meeting to try to reconcile, and I suspect that, again, if they reach an agreement, we'll come back. We also, Rick, don't have a state budget yet. We're operating on an interim budget, a 3-month budget that will carry us through October, and we're hoping that by then we're going to have a clearer picture of what's going to happen with regard to the federal government and whether or not they're going to supply us with some desperately needed resources to help balance the budget in the face of what could be an $8 billion deficit.
I have just one follow-up, Senator Tarr, on the policing conference committee that you're a part of, as you just mentioned. Can you share anything with us how that is going, or is that you can't do that at this point, or how's that conferencing going?
Well, Bill, I appreciate the question. As is often the case, the committee voted to close the process and bring it into an executive session, and so I'm not at liberty to discuss any of the details of that conversation. The only thing I feel confident in telling you is there are 6 very dedicated people trying to find the right solution to reconciling the 2 bills.
Unlike yourself, Senator, Rick and I have no secrets. You can ask us anything you want, and we will share. We will share anything with you, just so you know.
Well, if that's going to be the case, I suggest we schedule another slot.
Yeah, that's
so
right.
I have enough time.
Upon further review. Wait a minute. Yeah. Okay.
Senator, my final question this week in tartalk.com, you mentioned something about another EEE threat and a couple of bills that were passed. Any quick review you might want to mention?
So we are starting to see some cases of EEE in Massachusetts, Eastern equine encephalitis. And one of the bills that did get to the governor was one that gives the state the ability to have a more comprehensive approach to EEE. Oftentimes the spraying and containment of mosquitoes are handled by regional mosquito control districts, but there are times when there needs to be a greater, more consistent overarching policy statewide, and that's largely what the legislation does. So I do think we're better equipped to deal with it, but it's certainly a concern that as we're in the middle of a pandemic, we now see the threat of triple E on the rise in Massachusetts. So we did get that bill over the goal line. We do have some additional tools. I know they'll be deployed judiciously, but it is something that we also need to be concerned about.
Bill, you have a final thought here?
No, I'm good. I'm good. Yeah.
I've got one more question. It hits home. A relative of mine, an elderly relative, I know I'm up there too, but got a scam call the other day. And Senator, I know that you've been very heavily involved in these. Is there any follow-up, any policing of these scams that are going on toward the elderly? And I know this is a question that we is kind of off the rails here for you.
No, it's a good question, Rick. And one of the things that has been important with regard to some of the assistance that's been coming in terms of unemployment insurance and the so-called PUA, Pandemic Unemployment Assistance, those programs have been heavily negatively impacted by the scams that have been happening with regard to stolen identity. And so there is one or more groups out there that have been using stolen information from data breaches to try to file false claims. And on its face, that's incredibly wrong, but it's also had a negative impact on people who legitimately deserve benefits, because now the process has slowed because we have to verify their identity in ways that we didn't necessarily have to do before. Now, we're working to help people get through this, and a lot of it's been addressed, but every one of these scams is something to be concerned about. And Rick, what we suggest is if you get a call of that nature, then the local police department is the place to go with that. But we continue to work on this. And again, anyone's always free also to alert us, particularly if there's something that they think they need more advice or more guidance about. But my answer is, if it sounds suspicious, don't engage it.
Right. Senator, thank you for your time once again.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Rick. And thank you, Bill. Look forward to talking with you again soon.